Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mean Green Gridiron podcast, our preseason position preview series. Got Carter back. Carter sounds like
Hello.
he's doing a little beatboxing going on.
Yeah, I am. I got a little new makeshift studio in my new apartment, so we're
Nice.
enjoying the what's the word the acoustics.
Oh
I
yeah.
should, I should know that I'm a musician.
How have you been, Carter? Is there anything new? Anything new you want to share? Or
Yeah. I moved back to Denton, so I'm back
nice.
in the homeland of Denton, America. Um, so I'll be here for at least another year, but that's fun. Gonna get to some basketball and football games this fall. Which I've not really been able to do the last couple of years because of work. So uh, I'm working at the Ticket now. If anybody is a fan of the local
Woo!
sports station in DFW, I'm at the Ticket as a board op. So yeah, a lot's changed since we last talked. But yeah, going to be able to get to some games again, which I haven't really been able to do since I graduated. So yeah,
Yeah.
super excited.
Do you? I guess when are you like most commonly kind of doing your board op stuff? Like what?
I'm I'm mostly overnights right now. You got to kind
Uh,
of you got to earn your keep at the
oh
Ticket.
yeah.
So starting out of overnights, but it's fine. It's chill. I like being up there.
Yeah. Yep. No, I know there's some good ones. I think even I want to say even like one of the Soroys like used to do kind of overnight stuff or
Yeah,
um
a lot of the mainstay guys up there kind of started out doing board op.
yeah,
So
cool. Well, congrats, Carter. Yeah.
thank you.
We Miles and I talked some QB stuff last week. So today we're gonna go over the wide receiver room. Some familiar names, some new names, good mix. Zooming in here a little bit. So going over the kind of the depth chart. This is kind of a mock depth chart that I've put together. There's a lot of subject to change, potentially stuff here, but this is just kind of high level something that I think kind of easier to follow as far as like who more or less is going to be at which positions and anyways we'll start going over. So in the Eric Morris offense, you've got your Z receiver, it's an outside receiver, slot Y, outside receiver X, another slot receiver H, and then tight end. So I kind of did this based on where guys were last year, or especially kind of where they were at the end of the year on the depth chart, and then the newer guys kind of where they may slot in. So um yeah, I guess first off, so yeah, we can go over the newcomers. You got Miles Coleman in the slot, had a really solid bowl game. Landon Sides kind of moved to an outside receiver spot. Didn't have the best year last year as a sophomore after a really promising freshman year, but he had a great bowl game. Had a touchdown and was close to 100 yards. Wyatt Young's another guy who had a really solid true freshman year. Dalton Carnes started a good chunk of games. I think he's kind of back to more of a not as prominent a role as he was there for a while last season out of necessity. And then tight ends got a little bit of returning action going, but again, bringing in a lot of newcomers there. So yeah, I guess first off, Carter, what are your kind of impressions on some of the receivers that we are bringing back, and maybe some of the guys we've added? Like, what are some of the things that you're looking at this year going into the season?
Yeah, you touched on Miles Coleman. Really liked his performance against Texas State in the bowl game. White Young too was a guy who kind of popped up last year that showed some real promise. Those guys are both still underclassmen, so guys you'd like to see develop a little bit more. I wasn't as impressed with Landon Sides last year as I kind of hoped he would have been. I felt like he was due to kind of take the reins as like the WR1 kind of on
Yeah,
this team last year, and he didn't. And that didn't. It probably just came as an effect of how spread out the offense was with Chandler Morris. But uh, I'm excited about this wide receiver group. I think there's a lot more speed. That's kind of what we've really hammered with Eric Morris is the 6'2", 190-pound receiver who's just fast. We don't really have any like huge guys in this wide receiver core, but The only thing that kind of concerns me is how wide open the quarterback room is right now. And I know we're touching on receivers tonight, but kind of feels like the last couple of years there's been like the obvious QB1, and probably makes it easier for the receivers to gel a little bit with whoever that's been. I again, I'm not like inside the team. I don't know really how a football team works from the inside, so I'm sure chemistry will be fine. But given that there's really three guys who could end up starting at quarterback week one, uh, I tend to get a little bit nervous when two of our starting receivers are going to be sophomores, and I know Simeon Evans is probably going to end up taking the main spot at the Z. He's a guy I have a lot of high hopes for this year, but there's a lot of freshmen and sophomores in this receiver group, and we don't know who our quarterback is yet. So I will say it's promising. I think there's a lot of speed and a lot of skill. I like the transfers we brought in a lot. I also know that we're going to be looking at a little bit of a shake up on the offensive line too, which may kind of open up a little bit more of a passing game. So some guys might get chances to kind of prove themselves early on. I mean it's year 3 of the Eric Morris offense, and that has not been an issue up to this point. I know last year, one note I made for our podcast tonight was how bad we were on third downs last year. That's kind of one thing I forgot about in the offseason is we were not a good third down offense team last year. So that's one thing I hope that the new quarterback can take over and maybe kind of fix, which is a big ask, especially if it's, Mestermaker or Jimerson, who are both freshmen. But, a lot of these receivers are guys who could, really excel at route running. One guy figures out how to get past the defense, and we have a third down solution. So that's kind of the main thing I want to see from some of these guys is, do they have the speed and skill to fix that issue? Because as efficient as our offense has been, it feels like there's another level to get to that could, we've seen, at least I've seen, I don't know, I've listened to you guys' podcast, but I don't know if you've talked about it yet. It feels like we're getting a lot of kind of general hype from some national media as a team that could pop up and win 8 or 9 games this year. And I know we're all kind of jaded North Texas fans at this point where it's like, we've had years where we were really, really excited, and it feels like this is the team that's going to, make that leap. So I'm not getting my hopes up just yet, but I really think that if this offense and this receiver group can find a way to attack teams over the air for 10, 15-yard gains on third downs, then it's going to really open up. You get a 500-yard offensive game up to like a 650, 600. That makes a difference enough to get 2-3 wins, and now we're talking. So, I really like this position group. I think that there's kind of a good blend of, guys like I said, Miles Coleman and White Young, who have kind of proven themselves early on and have maybe the next step to take. I don't really know what to expect from Landon Sides at this point, but Baron Tipton's another guy who I think could make an immediate impact. So if you want to touch on him at some point, I would like to talk some Baron Tipton ball. But, that's I would say cautious optimism. I think there's a lot of depth, and especially a lot of variety in terms of underclassmen and juniors and seniors who are guys who could possibly step up and make an impact. But I would just say it's cautious optimism at this point.
And I think the kind of outside optimism that you talked about does seem to be more than it has been in past years. I think the Vegas over is like 6.5 wins for us right now, which I want to say usually it's 5.5. So it does seem that there is a little bit more perception towards our team of potentially having a better year. I think also the schedule is a big help there. I think we've got a very winnable schedule. We've got 7 home games, so I think that's part of it too. And then from the inside, for guys like us who follow the team more closely, obviously the Skylar Cassidy hire is probably the biggest potential game changer from years past to this year, as far as like potentially having a competent defense, that it looks like we're going to have. But we'll definitely talk more about that, as we go over to the defense. But right now, yeah, as far as the receivers, I think that there was a really good concerted effort to bring in guys who have a lot of experience. You look here,
Hmm.
Simeon Evans last year was Sam Houston's leading receiver. He's most of his stats for his career were last year, but 747 yards, 6 touchdowns. I've kind of got their career stats from all levels here listed with each player. Cameron Dorner is a guy who really turned some heads this year in spring. 6'1", 195, so he's a good size receiver, and it sounds like he's really fast too. 119 receptions, 1,467 yards, 13 TDs. So yeah, again, a lot of production. And then one that's kind of slid under the radar is a more recent pickup. This guy, Tyrese Hunt Thompson from Ferris State.
Yeah.
So he had 2,000 yards there and 21 touchdowns in his career. So the big time production there from that guy. And like I said, really under the radar. I haven't seen very many people even kind of mention that we picked him up. And he's another senior. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that have a lot of production. And then Miles Coleman, somebody you mentioned. So you were talking about the quarterback, which quarterback we end up going with. Something that was pretty evident was Mestamaker is his old high school teammate, and Coleman had like 250 yards on the season going into the bowl game, and then he and Mestamaker combined for like 120, 130 yards receiving. So, those are some of the things
I
where you
forgot they went to
got.
high school together.
Yeah, so I mean, those are some of those kind of chemistry connections, like you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, one guy, quarterback receiver, like have more than Coleman. I'm sure he can be productive with either quarterback or whoever that we go with, but having him with Mestamaker really seemed like there was some solid chemistry there. So that should be something nice going forward. But another thing you talked about was third down. So I think one thing that I like about this receiver room is that I think you have guys who can one get open quick. Coleman at his size, like he was able to really in the bowl game, he was able to create separation quick, like early from the line of scrimmage, not just run past somebody downfield. Like he was able to get in and out of his breaks quick, and that's what you really need to convert those third downs. Is you get somebody who can get open fast, and then boom, you throw the ball to him and he gets that first down, 5-6 yards, whatever. That's big. And then Simeon Evans from Sam Houston State, out of the newcomers, he's the one who I'm most familiar with, and he kind of reminds me of, I'm a Tennessee Titans fan. He kind of reminds me a little bit, maybe not caliber, but at least like play style wise, he kind of reminds me of AJ Brown, where it's just like you get on the ball quick, and then he's a big yak guy. He's almost sort of like a running back playing receiver. He had a lot of film at Sam Houston State where he takes just a short pass, a slant, or just a kind of wide receiver screen, and he looks like he's a running back out there, on the edge, and just reads his blocks well, makes guys miss, and also he's like tough to bring down. So that's like a really nice dynamic that I think he brings to the offense. Cameron Dorner, I think either one of these guys could start. Cameron Dorner, like I said, more of kind of that true like outside speed and length kind of receiver. Productive guy at D2 Shepherd. I think that he's going to be a big part of the offense. It's going to be one of the things that it really doesn't matter who starts. They're both going to get the ball. Slot receiver Miles Coleman, I think he's the guy. Another guy I'm really excited about is Terrence Lewis, the true freshman out of Bryan High School. I think he was our best offensive signee this year out of the high school guys. I mean, he has electric film, and he does it mostly from the slot, but like he was quarterback, returner, like that dude is just, he's so electric with the ball. He's not the biggest dude, 5'11", 165, but I think he's going to be a really productive player for us. And then, Sides and Hunt Thompson on the other outside, I think, again, kind of like with Dorner and Evans, I think, Sides and Hunt Thompson are both going to play, both going to get the ball. And then, slot, you got Wyatt Young. I think he showed a lot of promise as a true freshman, being a converted quarterback. And then Carnes is just a solid, especially as a backup, solid guy. So, like you said, good mix of young guys and experience. anything else as far as like, maybe kind of like a breakout candidate kind of thing, or under the radar guy that you're kind of have your eye on this year in this group?
Yeah, well, I was going to throw in Baron Tipton. Hopefully, I
Right.
mentioned him
Yeah.
at the
Let's
end.
talk Baron Tipton.
He seems. I know I talked about. There's a lot of, I don't want to say undersized, but um, just lower than average wide receiver size in this group. It's a lot of speed,
Right.
like you mentioned. It's going to be a lot of yak guys. Um, I think Mestamaker, at least if he is the projected starter, at least as of now. I mean, he's the only guy we have UNT
Well,
film
no.
on.
So I think right now it's either him or Poffenbarger,
Right.
the Miami transfer.
Which I haven't watched a ton of Poffenbarger's film, to be honest. He was, it's not like he was starting games at Miami anyways. But from what we saw out of Drew in the bowl game, I really liked his passing placement, and I think that he really looks comfortable with those, kind of quick slant passes. Obviously, some of his deep balls were really on the dot too, but
Yeah.
That's what gave Chandler Morris such success last year, is that he just looked composed in the pocket, was able to find guys for 7-8 yards at a time, and we did have good yak numbers last year, so I think that's going to be a big thing again this year. But as far as breakout candidates go, Baron Tipton's a guy with huge size. I think he's 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah, 6'5" on the roster.
I have a couple sources saying 6'6" on my notes, but we'll go with 6'5" as the official roster listing. But yeah, he's got huge size. He's not really bulky, but he has the height, and I think that he could be a guy that, especially lining up on the outside, if they have a target who can, bully guys just with his size, and kind of use some of the slot receivers going for those yards after catch as not a secondary option, but an exterior option outside of the Z or X, then I think that's going to make this whole offense a whole lot smoother. So I would like to see a outside guy with some size like Baron Tipton maybe break out this year. I know he's a redshirt freshman. He played a little bit last year, so I don't really know what, if much, to expect from him at all. But there's a couple guys I could see taking that next step, like I said. But he's a guy that I would like to see have a really good summer camp and possibly break the starter group out of fall. So
yeah, and I think I'm going to go the opposite direction here. I think my guy, it's kind of hard to say he's a breakout candidate because he's a starter, but Miles Coleman, something I really like about him is that he's 5'6", and I think that in this kind of era of college football, it's nice to have a player who is that good, that small, because the big schools aren't going to be as interested in getting the 5'6" wide receiver. So if like he can play, and he can, he's made that pretty clear. Like to be that, to be a productive player at that size, I think that's something that you can actually retain and keep.
Sure.
And say, okay, cool. Like Miles Coleman, 500, 600 yards, and we get him back because the big schools with all the NIL, they'd rather spend their money on a 6'2" like speed demon high school receiver, or transfer or whatever. Like I think that there is some value for us in I talked about this last week too with Jimerson at quarterback, only being 5'9", 5'10" from North Crowley. Like I think that there is something there in that. As long as I've been a North Texas fan, a lot of our best players that we've ever had have been guys who the only reason they were even able to come to North Texas is because they were undersized height wise. Obviously Mason Fine is prime example there. Jalen Darden at receiver, Carlos Harris at receiver, Breland Chancellor at receiver. A lot of these guys, it's like they come to North Texas because they are undersized, and guess what? To play receiver, you don't have to be super tall. If you can get open, if you can, create separation, you don't need to be towering over the cornerback. If you create separation and you're open and you can catch the ball, then you're going to make plays. And so I think that's, Miles Coleman. Yeah, I think Miles Coleman really embodies that. And, we also have a high school commit right now, Daniel Berry out of Pflugerville, and I'm not talking recruiting right now, but it's kind of the same thing. And again, that's a trend that I would like to see us exploit. Even DT Sheffield was another guy who we kind of got in a similar way, where he wasn't super big, but he was electric. And there's also a little bit of off the field issues, I guess, previously, that we were able to get him from that reason as well. But you have to get more creative in this era of college football to get real premier talent at a school like North Texas, and those are some of the ways you can do it. Baron Tipton, 6'5". That's a nice body to have out there. Another guy who I would say don't sleep on is Kyle. His last name is spelled Kaoch, but I think on the media guide it's
careful here.
Kyle Cook. So, anyways, he had some really impressive high school film, and he came out last year and he got a first down the first game of the year against South Alabama. And then the Texas Tech game, he was one of the receivers who the ball bounced off his hands and he got picked off when it was just like nightmare season that day. And he's a dude who, like I said, had a really good high school film. He clearly made an impression early on to make the travel team and get game action in those early games. And I think after that, we never saw him again. I don't know if it was kind of like a confidence thing, or they they felt like, all right, let's just redshirt you, and let's just preserve your red shirt, let you kind of work on the mental aspect, and then come back next season. And, I think he's another guy who 6'2", decent size, but he had really really good film, high school film of like he's pretty good with the ball in his hands, and he makes really good contested catches. Like, he's got good ball skills. So it's another redshirt freshman who I think can make a difference. And then Landon Sides, he switched from last year. He was, last 2 years he was slot receiver. In the bowl game, they put him at outside receiver at that X position. After I think we had some departures, and he ended up really fitting well at that X spot. That's where he had the good game. He had a couple deep catches, had a touchdown catch, really good throw by Mestamaker. So, I think Sides is primed for a good year now. I think that last year, like you talked about, he kind of got lost in the mix, but also he was fighting injuries, and even when he came back, it was just kind of like it just took a while for him to get back, where he needed to be.
Yeah, and I also, just to clear up what I said too. I mean, you said lost in the mix. That's a good way of putting it. I mean, DT Sheffield had such a huge year, like a breakout last year.
Yeah.
That, especially dealing with injuries, it's hard for, a guy with just a little bit of a sample size that we were like excited about going into last year. Somebody else steps up and takes that reign. It's hard to get it back. So hopefully with DT's departure, he kind of gets a chance to, kind of be a leader in the receiver room. I believe he has the most snaps of anybody in there right now.
Yeah, for us, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would love to see a nice little Landon Sides renaissance.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like I said earlier, I'm really interested to see Tyrese Hunt Thompson. Again, kind of an under the radar guy. I knew we picked him up, but I didn't realize how productive he was until I was kind of putting this together, and I was like, dang, this dude had 2,000 yards in his career at Ferris State. Like, that is a lot. That's a lot of production. That's 3 solid years worth of production, three good productive seasons, and coming here to take advantage of his last year. He actually I think went down with a season-ending injury last year, so he kind of took a medical red shirt and then came here. So looking to prove himself. And then last position wanted to go over here is tight end. So tight end, I have Brandon Young listed first here. He was kind of our starter in the bowl game, and he sort of took over for Oscar Hammond last year when Hammond kind of fell out of favor or had injuries or whatever the case was.
Yeah.
Young is a big dude, 6'5", 239, but like he looks like the prototypical tight end. Wasn't super productive, but like it was clear he played a lot last year. I mean, he is a sophomore because he burned his red shirt. Like, he played a good amount of football. The other guy coming in, Trey Williams. This is like our, if Brandon Young's kind of the all-around tight end, the maybe more blocking heavy tight end. Trey Williams is coming in to be sort of the more pass catching threat here. He had for his career, he's got 78 catches, 905 yards, 11 TDs. Almost all of that was last year at Limestone. So he spent his first 2 years at West Georgia D2 school. He was playing fullback there. And then last year he transferred to Limestone. They put him at tight end, and he had a huge breakout year. So he's a guy who I think he really found his spot at tight end last year. Like I said, 6'3", athletic dude. Like he's almost kind of like a wide receiver out there. Connor Vaughn, transfer from Tulsa. He's more of like a inline kind of blocking tight end. Had some touchdowns and kind of goal line packages. Victor Adarungboye, he's a redshirt freshman that we got from Houston area, and then last is Grant Gainer's a walk-on from Akron. So tight end, I feel like every year we talk about tight end at UNT. It's like, oh, this is going to be the year we get the tight ends more involved. This is going to be the year where we use the tight end or throw to the tight end more, and then it like never kind of ends up happening. What are your thoughts on the position, this room? How you expect to see the tight end position play out this year?
So I was doing some research on the tight ends earlier and found out that Connor Vaughn went to Flower Mound Marcus, which is my rival high school. So got a little bit of beef there, but no, I noted on his weight that on his 247 he was listed at 215. He's listed at 256 on our website, so it looks like he's bulked up quite a bit in college, which you want to see from a tight end for sure. I feel the same way about our tight ends, where every year it feels like we have like one guy who, like Oscar Hammond was that guy last year, where I was like, oh man, this dude has the physique, he's got the hands, like just a complete weapon at tight end. And it just feels like we just don't utilize them. Yeah. And I don't really expect that to change this year. I mean, it feels like we kind of have a nice blend of guys, but none that are really stand out. I do think Trey Williams has a pretty impressive resume, but how that will transfer from I don't even remember what division he was coming from.
Yeah, I think it was Division II, Limestone.
Are they D2? Okay.
Yeah.
I usually try to taper expectations a little bit with D2 guys. Especially I don't think he's probably currently projected to lead that group. My best guess off of what I've looked into is that Connor Vaughn would probably be the starting tight end, but just because he's got that experience from Tulsa, and I feel like he has the best size out of the group. Not to say Brandon Young can't have a big year, but that would be my go-to. I think, did Brandon Young play last year?
Yeah, so he was. Yeah, especially more towards the end of the year, he ended up kind of taking over more of the Oscar Hammond snaps, whereas which is to say not many. we were going more 4 wide receiver.
That's what I was going to say. I don't remember seeing his name very much.
He was the guy who in the bowl game, he caught a pass and he kind of went out of bounds a little bit early, and then it was a 4th down play and they marked us short, and then Damon Ward came out and was pissed off at the refs and got a unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that play.
Okay. Yeah. I did not see his name super often last year, so I couldn't remember if he had played or not. So yeah, that would be my best guess. Just as far as mid-June predictions go, I would venture to guess that's the lineup. Maybe Brandon Young proved something in spring ball and has a little bit of familiarity here, but I really do like Connor Vaughn's makeup, and I think that he's got probably the best chance to break out of this tight end group. But like I said, and you touched on it too, it does not feel like a position where really since Kelvin, we've had like anybody who's like really shined as a passing threat. And I would like to see that.
Well, there was that one year where we had the Jake Roberts Varkey's Gums duo.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about my 2 boys.
The one
Jake
Roberts,
Jake Roberts transferred too many times for me to to really hold some reverence there. Varkey's Gums did pretty quick too. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't have a ton of like real expectation for this tight end group. Honestly, it's just I would like to see one of them kind of step up and be a passing threat. But yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be a group that's going to be a force in our offense, at least right
No,
now.
I don't think it is either. But one thing I will say is that I think what we can judge this season as being a positive one for the tight end group is if they can have good kind of timely impacts. So like Trey Williams, for example, we don't need him to have 50 catches or anything crazy like that, but if he can have 4 or 5 timely kind of red zone touchdown catches where he adds a wrinkle to the offense where you've got a 6'3" tight end who's a good pass catcher into the mix with your other kind of not as tall receivers, or just kind of makes a few big plays here there, or where Connor Vaughn, like if he can be more of like like an impact in the run game and give good production there as far as like helping the run game to kind of take a step forward with his blocking at tight end, or Brandon Young maybe the same, or maybe kind of give a little bit of all around game where he's doing a little bit of both. Like I think if the tight end room can just give kind of that timely play in whatever these respective tight end specialties are, the areas of specialty, I think that would be a positive for this year. Is if Titans can just do that. You don't have to go out and be, Varquez Gums, Jake Roberts, catch a bunch of touchdown passes. It doesn't have to be that, but if they can just do what they do well in a timely fashion and complement the rest of the offense well, then
Sure.
I'd say that's a big win for the tight end position.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent blocking will open up short passing games, and especially with the shakeup in the running back room.
Mm-hmm.
I know McGill and Sibley are both guys who have some tenure here, but
Right.
we did shake that room up, and so
Yeah.
I think absolutely if you talk about the tight ends being able to block well, um, you know I think there's enough change up in the offensive line too, where like one guy stepping up and being a physical force is enough of a game changer. Like I said, you turn a 500-yard game into a 600-yard game a couple times, maybe that's the difference in a win or two. So yeah, I think that's huge.
Yeah, and I didn't realize I was going to talk about Jake Roberts as much today as I have, but you go back and look at that that 2021 season where we had that five game win streak. I've watched some of those kind of highlight plays of Ragsdale and DeAndre Torrey having really good games, and it was like a lot of the times Jake Roberts was at the end of the line of scrimmage, like getting after somebody and really opening up a big gap
Mm-hmm.
for a running back run through. Like that kind of thing can open up an offense. I don't think we had that last year, so that's something that I think would be of huge help to kind of like you talked about on third down. Part of the reason I think why we struggle on third down is because it felt like we were either getting good productive plays on first and second down and just getting another first down, or we were having kind of incomplete passes or bad runs that were putting us in third and long. So it's kind of like either or. You either got the first down before you got the third down, or you're in a third and long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having good tight ends, blocking tight ends can help set that situation where you're getting more productive runs, you're getting more positive yardage, you're getting more 4 or 5 yard runs to keep your offenses down in distance in healthy positions where you can expand the playbook and run whatever you want. So I think those are some of the little things that could help the offense in those kind of situations where maybe they didn't struggle overall in terms of yards or points, but some of the more timely things and some of the games that mattered and were down to the wire where you kind of left some meat on the bone, so to speak. So any final thoughts about the receiver room or anything else here you wanted to end with here, Carter?
I think we got a good group of guys to run some fun screens, a lot of speed. Um, Size is a little concerning for me entering the year, but that's not a huge issue at a school like UNT. We're not, we're not going to outbully people across the board. We're not getting 5-star builds. We're getting 3-star builds. So you got to do it. And like you said, we're the kind of school where undersized guys can shine, and
Mm-hmm.
we've proven that both. Just going back to the Latrell years, which is, I guess, kind of the peak UNT offense years of this last decade, is Latrell and Morris both have been able to utilize undersized guys and get the most out of them. I mean, if you're talking about probably the two best offensive players this school has ever had are Mason Fine and Jalen Darden. Both of them were basically shunned everywhere else because of their size, and they came here and broke out. So,
Yeah.
Miles Coleman, who had a great bowl game and has the connection with Mestamaker, that's a guy who could very easily have one of those, Darden or Sheffield type years where it's just like you look at the stats at the end of the year and he's, put together like an all-star type performance. So I'm excited about it. Like I said, it's just cautious optimism. I think maybe I've had my feelings hurt too many times about like some transfers coming in here that I had way too high of hopes for. I do like what we've done with the transfer portal this year, especially on the defense, which we'll talk about later. I'm actually probably more excited about our defensive transfers than the offensive ones at this point. But I think there's enough returning talent in the receiving room to provide some consistency. I think the guys that they brought in have added to that skill set. There's a lot of young guys who I think could, there's like 3 or 4 underclassmen here who I could see like, maybe ending up as like our second best receiver at the end of the year. I do think Coleman will probably end up being the guy as far as, name recognition and the guy defenses are focused on the most week in, week out. But I think there's like 3 or 4 underclassmen here who could definitely, shake things up and wind up having a really good year. So I'm excited for the receivers. Think it'll be a good year. Not really too worried about the North Texas offense.
Yep. Yeah. I will end with one last shout out to Cameron Dorner. I know he had a lot of positive things being said about him during spring ball, and that's always a nice little indication. I know it's kind of unfortunate where you only kind of get guys for one season a lot of times, and especially if they're a senior, then you're only going to get them for 1 year. But I remember back when Jamori Macklin first came on board, he was like the guy that spring. Like it was like I want to say his first season was 2022, and so he was getting a ton of recognition that spring. And then the season came, and he didn't have a super great year, but then the next year he came out and obviously had a huge year in 2023. So I think it's good to kind of hear those things in spring of like, okay, who's standing out, and he's one of the guys whose name was mentioned a lot as kind of like the standouts for spring. So I think that's going to be interesting to see, how that translates to the field, and it's definitely never a bad thing when you're getting a lot of good pub, good press as a top performer. So. I think that's about it, and we'll try and continue this series and go over the other position groups. But until then, thanks for listening, and go Mean Green.
Go Mean Green.